Hello everyone and welcome back to another Cadence how-to video. My name is Adam and today we're going to talk about how to make your design pop with a neatly designed title page for your schematic. So a title page fulfills a couple different functions in your design. It's a good way to give a broad idea to maybe someone who's reading your schematic of what the project is meant to do, what it looks like, what pages are in the schematic, especially if you're working with maybe a 100 or a 200 page schematic, as well as, maybe include things like a screenshot of what the actual physical board looks like. What we're going to do is go through OrCAD and talk about how you can include some of these things in your title page. And then also I will include for you guys to download an example of this title page. So without further ado, let's jump into OrCAD. All right, guys, so what you see here is a title page that I created earlier. We have a couple different things on this page. You'll notice that we have the title of our design as well as some additional things like a status of the project. We have a description of the design, a table of contents, as well as some screenshots of the design. Here you can see I have the top view, bottom view, as well as a 3D isometric view. Now these things are very easy to include if you've already created your design in Presto. So what I'm going to do here is actually delete this page, which I have called title page, and then we're going to create it from scratch. So let's go ahead and delete that page. Oops. Let's make sure everything is saved. I'll close my property editor. All right, so the page is deleted. To add a new page, we're just going to click right click on the schematic section and then click new page. Now normally you would call this something like page 1, title block, and you'll notice that it goes to the bottom of your project pages. A very, very easy way to basically order these in the way that you want to is if you rename them, add a number beforehand, basically in the order which you want it to appear. So you'll notice that I already have my power page is 01, the microcontroller page is 02, etc. So if I put 00 for my title block, I should expect that to go to the first page, and you can see that it does so. So let's go ahead and open up that title page. Depending on what size of sheet you're using, what title block you have in your design, it might look slightly different. So use this just as a guide and then modify it so that it meets your requirements. So I'm going to place the title block that we created in a previous video. I think it looks really well for this design, or it looks really good for this design. Now I can add things like the title, all of these different information such as the organization address, the name, but for the purpose of actually how to create your title page, that's just extra work. So we're going to skip that for now. So the first thing we actually want to do is maybe place a large title at the heading of our page. So you can go to place, text, and we're going to call this the How to Bomb Demo Board. Now, if you click OK, you can place it anywhere you want on your schematic page. I like to first place it and then double click on it and change things such as the font or the justification. However, you'll notice that if you're in the place command text, you can also do these ahead of time, right? So you can change the font size, or if I double click here, change, and maybe I want it to be size 36, for example. Click OK. Another thing that I had in my previous example was I had a status, and I called it a released status. That way I know if the design is still being worked on, if it's already been released to manufacturing, or maybe it's only gone through one stage of design checking, for example. The other thing that I had was a project description. And the reason we're going to go over this is because I had a pretty long block of text, and then I want to show you how we can actually control that block of text. So we're going to go ahead and add another, not title block. We're going to add a text here. And this is going to be our project description. Now you can add whatever text is relevant to your project. For my project, I had this text here, which I can copy. But before I do that, I'm just gonna show you one quick thing, and that is, make sure that word wrap is on. If you are working with a pretty long text string and you paste it in here, OrCAD Capture is going to try to include all of that text in a single line. So in order to, let's just change the font here. In order to make it so the text appears on a new line, if we go and double click in here, you'll notice that there's a little hint here that tells us press Control plus Enter to start a new line. And then looking at the size of my font, maybe I want to cut it off around here. I should probably use Control Enter right after learning. So Control Enter, and then I can basically just use this as a guide to know that, you know, right around this area is where I should add a new line to my text string. So maybe right here, and electrically, sure, right here, and then press OK. And then you'll see that it fits it all pretty well. In this case, maybe what I want to do is, you know, put electrically on a new line as well, just to make sure that I'm not cutting off any additional information. And then maybe function needs to be on its own line as well. And you can see that it fits really nicely. And then you can also play around with the font size depending on, you know, how large you want it to be, just to make sure that it all fits and we have space for, you know, our 3D views of the board. And here previously, you know, I had already copied and pasted this with all of the new lines already included. So I can basically just copy paste this into my title page. All right, so let's talk about adding the screenshots of our board into the title page. Now I have here open OrCAD Expresto. This is a board that we made in a previous how-to series. It's a very simple board, but what we want to include is the 3D views, just so maybe if a user is looking at, if someone is looking at our schematic, they can also understand what the board is supposed to look like. So in Presto, if I go in the visibility panel, this third section here is called display, and I can go into my 3D view. In the 3D view, if you click on this box in the bottom left here, you'll notice that you can quickly cycle through the top view, bottom view, front, back, left, right, etc. And I actually like to use this top isometric as my general 3D view. And then you can just use your middle mouse button maybe to center it on your screen, move it around, whatever it might be. And then the other thing that I recommend is when you're in the 3D view and you go into the display settings, set your background to a solid white color. Now by default, I think usually it's set to gradient and more of like a grayish color. But by using white and making it solid, if I take a screenshot of like this, you know, square section here, when I place it on my canvas, it's not going to stand out with a different color. And I'll show you how that looks because I already took a couple screenshots. And you can just use the Windows built-in screenshot function and then crop the image, you know, using Paint or whatever image processing tool you use. So if I go to place picture, it's a JPEG that I saved. I'm going to go ahead and select this how-to screenshot top.jpg. Press open. It's going to take a second, but it will load on your mouse cursor. Go ahead and just click it. And then you'll notice that when you select it, you have these little indicators in the corners so that you can resize that image to, you know, a size that will fit in your design. So this will be our top. Let's go ahead and place another one for the bottom. So there's our bottom view. If you want to align these, a very easy way to align these is, let's say that this one's over to the left here. I can control click to select multiple objects, go to edit, align, and then you want to align these to the right. And that also shows me that, these aren't exactly the same size, so I can go ahead and adjust the size accordingly. Next thing that I really quickly want to do is just add some text here. Call this the top view. And then we also want a bottom view here. There we go. And then let's add the 3D view, which again, if I'm in Presto, I'm using this isometric view. So here's the top, very easy to take a screenshot, bottom, and isometric. Back in Capture, go to Place, Picture, under JPEG, and here's my isometric view. Oops. And let's just go ahead and resize that, and I want to place it right around here. And then let's copy this and call this the top isometric view. Let's maybe abbreviate isometric, top ISO view. Perfect. So the last thing we need to add to this title page is a table of contents. So I'm going to copy this project description, and we're going to place another section here and call it the table of contents, or abbreviate it to TOC. Again, depending on what size of page you're using, what font sizes you want to use, the spacings will be different. In this case, I have to occasionally play around with some of these because I'm using a pretty small page size. I think I'm actually using an A-size page, where normally I would use a B-size page, but same ideas apply. Just make sure that you resize it or move things and arrange them accordingly. Okay, so the next thing we want to add to our design is a table of contents. Now, you can either manually add all of these by, placing rectangles and text, but that would be, very tedious task. And then anytime you make changes to your schematic, you'd have to manually, fix any of that information. And that can be quite a pain. So what we're going to take advantage of is something called an OLE object, which can be placed inside of an OrCAD Capture schematic, which is basically, in this case, we're going to place an Excel spreadsheet inside of the schematic. And all of the formatting and colors and fonts in that spreadsheet and information will just be displayed on here. So let's go ahead and first copy one of these titles here. We're going to call this the table of contents, or I'm just going to abbreviate it as TOC. To place an OLE object, you go to Place, OLE Object, and then select Microsoft Excel Worksheet, or you can even create one from an existing file. In this case, what I'll do is actually create one from a file because I already have a spreadsheet. Let me just show you what that looks like. So here's my spreadsheet where I have the page number and the page name. And I can just go ahead and keep it like this without any formatting. When you create the new OLE object from an existing spreadsheet, it's going to copy that information and then embed it into the schematic. So then we can make our changes in the actual schematic one. Now, how I actually enter this information in here is very easy to do. Let's click Cancel. What you can do is if you right click on your design and go to the Edit Object Properties, in the title block section, if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll notice that there's a column for page name and page number. And these will exist for all title blocks because it's one of the default properties for a title block. So all I really have to do is just highlight these, click Control-C on my keyboard. And let me just delete these really quick. And then I can do Control-V and paste them into my spreadsheet. So if you're working with like a 100 or a 200 page schematic, it's very easy to fill out your spreadsheet. Or you can even split it between different spreadsheets depending on how much information you can fit on a single page. So we're gonna go ahead and save that, close. I'm gonna close the property editor, no changes made there. Let's go ahead and place that OLE object, create from file, and then we're gonna browse to that spreadsheet. Click OK. Then it's gonna ask us where we want to draw it. I'm just gonna outline what I guess is the size that I want it to be. And there you can see it automatically adds that spreadsheet for us. And now what we can do is add some formatting. So for example, maybe I want this to have a blue background and bold the text for my headers. And then let's go ahead and add some borders, and maybe let's even center justify the page number. Okay, make sure that you save whatever changes you make to your spreadsheet, and you can close it. And there you can see that the changes that we made to our spreadsheet, in this case, the formatting, is automatically represented in our OLE object. And then, depending on how large you want this to be, you can go ahead and resize it. If you need to add additional columns or rows in the future, you can do that as well. But I would always recommend starting from an existing spreadsheet and then importing it. In my opinion, that's just easier to do when you're importing all the information first. All right, so we have a basic title page. Again, make sure to figure out what font size you want to use so that it pops on your it pops out on your schematic page. If you're using a larger sheet size, you might need a larger font. If you're using a smaller sheet, it might be okay with a smaller font. And then print it out to make sure that it's actually readable on a physical page, or if it's on a PDF, if it needs to be readable on like a tablet, or maybe you'll be sharing this on on a presentation board. Whatever it might be, I hope you guys like this video. If you have any comments or examples of your own title sheets, please feel free to share them. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. And again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.